All right. Thank you all so much for coming today. My name is Jackson Ullman. I use he, him, his. I'm a member of the class of 2021, and I am an orientation coordinator. Today for Orientation Plus, we have organized a panel called Demystifying Academia. We've invited three Macalester students and two of our faculty members to come to speak to us about what academic life is like, their experiences, what they all think incoming students should know but typically don't, among other things. And we're so excited to have all of our panelists here. They're all wonderful, and I'm so excited for you all watching this to meet them today. And so I'm going to pass it off to our first speaker, Ellen Graham, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ellen Graham. I use she, her, and I'm part of the class of 2021. And I'm an applied math and statistics major, although really I'm just a statistics major. Just one more quick thing about myself, so you all get to know me. I'm pretty active in the MSCS department. If we were having in-person classes, you'd see me stomping around plenty with my keys jingling. But unfortunately, that won't be happening. Maybe some of you will have me for office hours. That would be really sweet. Just to, let's see. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how I felt as an incoming student coming into Macalester, and how I chose to do statistics in general, and my major. I came in and knew I wanted to do math-related things, but had never even considered statistics as a field. I thought it was kind of for losers, but then here I am now. It's all I really think about. And the thing that I took away from this, or I want you all to take away from this, is that it's these kind of random interactions that can sometimes heavily shape your life. So, the reason that I really became a statistics major is because somebody that I played tennis with, after I came to tennis having no idea how to play tennis, took a liking to me and said, hey, you should become an office worker in the math department. And because of that, I started talking to all the professors. I became, a fixture of the department. And, that's how I really got into it. And that's something that you'll learn as you get more into the academic world, is that a lot of these things just happen randomly, and there's a lot of informal things that happen. So, half of the connections that you're going to make are just, so you get introduced to somebody at a coffee event. And because of this, you should really all go to your department coffees, even if you're not sure if you're going to like the department. And you should really go to office hours. That's where you start to build big connections with professors. That's the next thing that I want to talk about. Office hours are huge. To me, so what they are briefly is that, you go to a professor with questions, or sometimes just to talk, and they talk to you about the class, or sometimes just about your life. For me, they're terrifying. Even as a senior, I'm still scared to go to them every single time. So I just wanted to give everybody some knowledge that it's okay if you're scared. I'm still scared. Some tips that I've always done: I write down all my questions beforehand, just that I have a script to go off of if I get too nervous. And if I'm really feeling it, I'll try to find somebody in class that maybe I sit next to, or maybe I'm friends with, or sometimes just someone who even knows the professor, and I'll try to bring them along with me to the office hours. The last big thing that I want to hit on as things that you should know, but perhaps don't, are that academics isn't everything at Macalester. There's a whole lot else in the world out there. And if you only think about academics, you're going to feel pretty poorly after a pretty short amount of time. First year, it was basically all I paid attention to, except for these occasional tennis games. And I got pretty burned out. And it wasn't until, this summer's break that I worked at a summer camp with a bunch of kids and had a bunch of fun there, that I realized that it's not all about academics, and you should really try doing other things.
in your spare time. The last big shout out that I want to make is
is kind of in this vein of you need to take care of yourself, which is that I'm trans, and I just want to give a huge shout out to Health and Wellness. They have an incredible medical team. Dr. Steph, wonderful person, does great gender care if any of you ever need that. Maybe some of you will, maybe some of you won't. But also, more broadly, Health and Wellness is just an incredible place. Really care about you, and it's going to be super important in pandemic times. So that's just kind of on the vein of take care of yourself, both emotionally, mentally, and physically, especially in these times.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Before we move on, I wanted to ask a quick clarifying question. You mentioned the MSCS department. Hopefully I got the letters right. Could you just tell everyone what that is for those of us who don't know?
Yes, sorry, I forgot acronyms. It's the Math, Stats, and Computer Science department.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was a really fun story about how you got involved in that department. And I'm sure we'll hear lots of other fun stories about how people have found their departments, kind of knowing what you all are going to speak about. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Professor Katrina Phillips, who's going to give us our first faculty perspective.
So hi, everyone. Jackson, thank you for asking me to be part of this. It's really exciting to be able to just give students another opportunity to start to find ways to connect with professors and current students and things like that. And so, as Jackson mentioned, I'm Professor Katrina Phillips. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an assistant professor in the history department here at Macalester. And most of my classes, or at least my main research interests and my teaching interests, are in American Indian history and the history of the American West. And one class that I'm really excited for, I mean, I love all of my classes that I teach here, but I get to teach a first year class this fall that's called The Empire Strikes Back. And it's about resistance in the US Empire. And yes, you can laugh, you can roll your eyes at the title, but I am so proud of it. So please don't take that away from me. But what I'm really excited about is that I got to take a lot of courses on kind of these ideas of colonialism and imperialism while I was in grad school. And, you know, that kind of comparative component to what I was learning about as far as Native American and Indigenous studies. And I've always wanted to teach a class like this. And I'm so excited that I get to do this and to kind of let students see what history is like. And, you know, a lot of people, history kind of gets a bad rap sometimes because you think, oh, all I have to do is memorize dates, right? Like this war started in this year and it ended in this year. But history is about so much more than that. And you know, I work with our amazing staff members in the library and in the archives here. And I'm just really excited to be able to give students a chance to see all of the different layers and complexities that are part of history and part of history here at Macalester. And as far as, you know, kind of thinking about a couple things that incoming students should know but don't, I kind of want to give the faculty perspective on office hours. And so, Ellen, thank you for leading us into that part of the conversation. And, you know, the idea of office hours, it probably does sound a little scary, right? You know, it's your professor is sitting there in their office and they're just kind of hanging out, right? Like waiting for students to stop by. And what I've started telling my students is that office hours are for you, right? If there are, you know, if I say something in class and it's a concept that you might not be that familiar with, but you don't necessarily feel comfortable raising your hand in the middle of class and saying, hey, you know, hold up, professor, like, I have no idea what you're talking about here. Office hours are a chance to come in and talk more about things like that. If you have a question about one of the readings, if you have a question about one of the assignments, if, you know, you're stuck looking for a source or you're having trouble kind of thinking through some things. That's one thing that office hours are for, right? Is that chance to come in and get clarification and things like that. But I mean, honestly, office hours are also a time to just stop by and hang out. I mean, I have a lot of students who, once they figure out when my office hours are, they might not have had a class with me in a semester or a year or 2 years, but they want to stop by and say hi. And those are some of the best parts of office hours, right? Like once you find, professors' office hours and you start to connect with them, both in the classroom and out, I think that's really a main part of the Macalester experience, right? Is to give you that chance to have these conversations with faculty members, with your professors and your instructors. And it's a really great piece of the whole Macalester puzzle. And then just one other thing I wanted to mention, I kind of talked about this a little bit, but kind of thinking about what classes will be like. And they're going to be different for each professor, for each subject and things like that. But at least, in my classes, and I know a lot of my colleagues do the same thing, your input and your perspective is really important and it's really critical. And, our students come to Macalester with such a huge range of diverse experiences and perspectives. And, when we have discussions or when we have, smaller group conversations, when we bring all of these voices to the table, it makes for a really rich conversation. And it deepens the connections that we have, not only with the materials in the classes, but also with your classmates. And again, that's one of the things that I love about teaching at Macalester, is that when you have these smaller class sizes, you have that time, you have that ability to make sure that your voice and your perspective are also part of the conversation within your classes.
Thank you so much for that really nice kind of introduction to what classes will be like at Macalester, and also for giving us both sides of the coin, Professor Phillips and Ellen, on office hours. I know as a student, I had never heard of office hours before, other than what my older siblings told me about college. And so having that information coming in would have been really helpful for me. So I'm going to move our conversation to our next speaker, who is going to be Olivia Nyman. Thank you so much.
Hey y'all, I'm Olivia. I use they, them pronouns. I am class of 2022, so I'm going to be a rising junior. And I am a theater and dance major with a performance design and technologies minor, and hopefully an ASL minor. Yeah, it's a mouthful. But yeah, so I just want to talk a little bit about what my experience was like being an incoming student. I was the type of student that is very overwhelmed and just always trying to do way too much. Signed up for like a million student organizations. I had like no idea what I wanted to major in because I just loved everything. So I had a big issue with time management. I actually took a gap year beforehand, so I had to completely relearn how to study and how to block out time and not overload myself, which honestly I think is kind of a trial and error process. So give yourself that time to adjust. It will take time. But just to kind of circle back to like when I said how I wanted to do everything, especially for a major, I eventually narrowed it down to theater and dance, which is one major. Don't be fooled by the and environmental studies, which are very different majors. So I ended up taking classes in both departments my first semester, and I was just drawn more to theater. And it was just, I just felt like it was something that I wanted to study and try to make a career, even if I didn't have an exact plan. Like I didn't know, do I want to be a playwright? Do I want to be like a technical director, but I just knew it was something that I wanted to do. And I was still able to keep up my interest in environmental studies by taking more courses and joining orgs based around environmental issues, such as the Sunrise Movement, which is a climate policy advocacy group on campus and across the nation. So you can still like find time for everything. It just takes time. I know that's a weird way to put it. But yeah, so if you do feel overwhelmed by everything when you first get in, don't worry, it does get better. But yeah, as well as things getting better, when I came into academia too, I was also confused by a lot of things. People were using words that I did not know, and the readings were really, really dense, and they are still really, really dense. And I'm going to be a junior, an upperclassman, and I still don't understand most of my readings the first time through. And it is okay not to know everything. Especially in class, like I personally experienced a lot of internal pressure to always know everything. So people would use words like pedagogy, or like I wouldn't know what utilitarianism was, can't even pronounce it. And just like I remember being very afraid to let others know that I didn't know what that was, because they are just like, it feels so natural when it comes into classroom discussion that other people know what they're talking about. But you always have the right to ask questions, because if other people can't explain what they're talking about in simple terms, then they probably shouldn't be saying it. And you have the right to be on the same page as everybody else in that classroom, whether you do ask questions in the room or, like Katrina was saying, going to the office hours. I've gone to office hours like with the reading and being like, can you please just tell me what this means? Because I've read it over 3 times and I don't understand it. And you can do that. It's really valid. Yeah. Another thing that I would like to talk about and sort of plug is disability services. I know disability can kind of sound a bit like intimidating, but it's not a dirty word, and going to the offices is not scary or intimidating at all. If you think you would benefit from accommodations, even if you don't have a specific diagnosis, you should talk to them. You just make an appointment, and they'll tell them what your situation is, and they'll do your best to meet your needs. I have a friend who doesn't have diagnosed anxiety, but clearly has like really debilitating anxiety and was able to get testing accommodations because of that. So they'll do what their best to help you, even if you don't know exactly what you want. They can be like your wingman if you're just having a really, really tough weekend or week or whatever, and you have to go to your professor and say, I just can't get this assignment done on time. They can be the ones to back you up too. You start that relationship and conversation with them early. And hopefully your professor will also be very understanding. But accessibility is something we all deserve, and you're not a worse student for using accommodations. And that's actually something I relate to a lot, because I was afraid of disability services during my first year. I did not want to talk to them. I just did not go to them at all. But one of the things that did help me as an incoming student was I found pretty quickly other autistic students specifically, and other neurodivergent students like myself. And we actually founded an organization called Mac Autism Community. And having connections with other people with similar experiences as you, even if it's not like something formal like disability services, was really helpful in finding guidance and like mentorship from older students, and also just building my confidence, whether it was like through the org that I started or just meeting people randomly. And like building those connections is the reason why I ended up going to disability services later. So yeah, just really foster those connections, and I think that's what I have to say.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I'm going to ask a quick clarifying question. You were talking about your majors and minors, and you mentioned your minor, I think, was ALS. Could you just tell us what that was really quickly?
Oh, ASL, American
Excuse me.
Sign Language. Yes,
Thank
and
you.
that is actually through St. Catherine University, not through Macalester, through a program called ACTC that I could spend another 5 minutes talking about. But yes, American Sign Language.
Wonderful. Thank you for giving us that brief bit of context, and also for having so many great things to say. You mentioned sustainability, and we've done a webinar with the Sustainability Office, and we've actually had a representative from Sunrise come speak to us. You can find those videos on our Orientation Plus website. And then you also spent a significant time talking about disability services and accommodations. If you are an incoming student who doesn't know what accommodations are, doesn't understand what an Office of Disability Services does, I encourage you to reach out to Melissa Fletcher and the Disability Services Office. They do so many things for so many students, myself included, and it's a great resource for any student to seek support from. They're committed to making sure that college is accessible for people of all backgrounds and all needs. And they're one of many great resources who you'll learn more about during orientation. So I'm going to stop talking about that for now, and I'm going to make sure that we have enough time for the rest of our speakers. And on that note, I'm going to pass the conversation to Professor Goldman. Nanette, thank you so much.
Jackson, thank you for organizing this, and I echo Katrina's sentiments that it's really an honor to be here. And Olivia and Alan, thank you for your really insightful comments, and Ayana, I look forward to yours as well. My name is Nanette Goldman, she, her, hers. I'm in classical Mediterranean and Middle East. I teach Latin, Greek, Hebrew, language and literature. I also teach ancient literature courses in translation. And I am also teaching a first-year course, FYC, we call them, as I'm sure everybody knows, called Tenors in Togas, Greek and Roman Myth in Opera. And I've taught it twice, both times as an FYC. And I love teaching it because it combines my two careers, and that is the ancient world and music. I'm a professional violinist and violist. And I found that Greek myth in particular is a really popular and accessible entry point into what's called classical literature. That's traditionally Latin and Greek literature. And many students have in high school and around had a prior exposure to Greek myth. So it's just a fun course to spend time doing. So like everybody, I have some advice or some perspective from the faculty side, and I'll be repeating some of the things that you've heard, but good advice always bears repeating. I have 3 things I'd like you to think about as you're trying to demystify academia, and that's a great title for this panel. And the first thing is that I really encourage you to do is communicate readily with your professors, and you've already heard some about this. Your professors, will be your advocates as you venture out into the post-Macalester world. And it's important to build relationships with your professors by communicating in an honest and a prompt and a professional manner. When you build your career network, that's how you do it. You build communication and trust and respect. And so your interaction with your professors is a really good place to practice those skills. You can certainly use email as a tool to develop coherent and properly pitched written expression. And also a quick response to your professor's emails is a good way to indicate that you're engaged and responsible. And then office hours, we have heard about that several times, but I'll reiterate. This is a great place to develop a rapport with your professors. We want you to succeed. So we need your help in getting to know you, getting to hear how you're doing. What are your strengths? What are your aspirations? So it's important for us to hear from you, and we love that. So that's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice also echoes what Jackson and Ellen and Olivia have already said, and also Katrina, is make use of the campus resources. And Jackson really helped me kind of define this and put this to the fore. And we've got great offices, and you've heard about disability services. You've heard about the Health and Wellness Center. We have the MAC Center, which is for tutoring and writing excellence. We have the Center for Religious and Spiritual Life. We have career exploration. We have the library, Study Away, multicultural life. I might have already said that. Health and wellness. So all of those campus offices are wonderful. And then also, as Olivia and Ellen alluded to or mentioned specifically, the student organizations are great places to find compatriots where you share interests or you share backgrounds, or you can explore ideas that are way outside of your comfort zone, but in a safe and welcoming environment. So these offices and these student organizations are places that you'll make some of your most long-lasting friendships, and the places that you'll discover and develop your passions. And they're places that you'll build your networks and communities. And then my third piece of advice, I think, is what I think is the most important. And it's to choose a major that allows you to be your own best self. Any major at a selective institution like Macalester will prepare you for work or graduate school. You don't have to be a chemistry major to go to medical school, or an econ major to be in business, or even a computer science major to be in the tech industry. The fact is that the more broad your education is, the more attractive you are to graduate schools or employers. And there may be certain course requirements that will be important in your career trajectory, and you can definitely work those into your curriculum. But it's really important to choose a major that you love, that attracts the kind of people you admire, and that makes you happy while you're at Macalester. It will help you find out who you want to be in the world. And it's not your parents' decision, it's not your counselor's decision, it's not your peer group's decision, it's your decision. So my advice is take a lot of different courses, decide what subject you like, to think about what department makes you feel most at home, that supports you, that wants you to be there. This is the department that will help you succeed when you've graduated from Macalester and you venture into the outside world. And I'll tell you a little anecdote, and I hope I'm not going too long here, about my path 100 years ago when I was going to be a first year in college. So I was all set to be a professional violinist, and I was enrolled in a music school, and I was ready to practice 8 hours a day and take auditions. And there was a little voice nagging at me that said, you really want to be more broadly educated. It's not really who you are. So in a panic moment, I scrapped that, and I had about 3 weeks, and I applied to Carleton, which is a liberal arts school, just very much like Macalester, and got in. And so I was able to start my liberal arts education on time. And I also kind of been planning to go to medical school. So I started on that pre-med track and took chemistry and calculus and biology and physics and all of that. And it was fine. But again, that little voice was saying, you're not really enthused about these subjects. And the people that are in your track, they don't really have the same aspirations and same worldview that you do. So this is somewhere early in my sophomore year, and somebody, and I don't remember who, suggested that I take ancient Greek. And I had done Latin in high school, and I'd done Latin at Carleton and used it for my language requirement, but I didn't know that Greek was related to Latin. I'd never had any idea about what classics was, Latin and Greek. It certainly wasn't on my radar as a major, but I took it because I liked Latin, and I took Greek, and I fell in love. And I loved the alphabet. I loved the sound. I loved how the mechanics of the language worked. I loved the literature. I just was so happy doing my Greek homework. So miraculously, I realized, well, I can major in this. So I did. I remember everything about that day when I decided I could be a classics major. I remember what I was wearing. I remember where I was on campus, what time of day it was. It was just a seismic world shift. And it was so right for me. I wasn't thinking about my career. I just knew that it made me very happy. It freed me from anxiety. It just allowed me to be my best self. And it was liberating. So my main advice really is to let your inner voice lead you to something that you love to study, something that you love to think about. Find professors and students that you can imagine as part of your community, and that will be a good place to call your academic home.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that story. As a little bit of background to what Nanette started out with, where professors can be your advocates. Nanette has been a faculty member for 3 of my courses now. And she has been phenomenal for me figuring out how to balance my academics with my health. And she's not alone in that. So many professors at Macalester are more than willing to help you figure out how to be the best student that you can be. And whether that's through office hours, through an email, finding time to connect with them and have that conversation is really valuable. And so before we go on for too long, though, I want to introduce our final speaker, a student named Ayana. Ayana, thank you so much for coming with us today.
Thanks for letting me be a part of this. So as Jackson said, my name's Ayana Smith-Kooiman. I use she, her, hers. I'm a rising junior, class of 2022, and my major is political science, legal studies concentration, perhaps an American studies minor. We will see how COVID goes. A little bit about me and my role at Macalester. You'll probably see me quite a bit around campus. I work at the information desk. So I'll probably be the first person you see if campus is open and you're able to get on campus this year. I'm also part of QuestBridge, which is low-income first-gen student group. It was kind of based around a scholarship that I could probably go on about, but I'll just say it's called QuestBridge. I'm also part of the improv group on campus called Fresh Concepts, and I play the cello, although I don't know how much orchestra will get done because COVID. But that's a bit about me. When I first got to Macalester, I will tell you I felt completely unprepared for a college education. I didn't know how to write papers. I didn't know how to do research. I didn't know what an internship was. The Career Exploration Center was foreign to me. I'd never been there. And so I just want to say my first bit of advice is just speak what your insecurities are and someone will be around to help you. And I think that's been pretty true for me, whether it's a professor, whether it's another student, a staff, faculty member. So how I got into political science, I kind of knew going into college that I wanted to either study political science or history or a combination of both. And I took one political science class and fell in love and said, yep, this is it. But I will say that my first semester, I had a pretty broad range of classes, which I really recommend because you will find gems that will give you stories and friends that will last all 4 years. For me, I had a geology class. I don't do anything with rocks now, but it was a fantastic moment for me to get to know people, kind of get acclimated with the curriculum. I got to eat rocks, which is a fun story. Um, and so I say just really cast a broad range of net with your classes. Don't feel like you have to have a plan set in mind because it could change a million times before you get to, I'm a junior now and I'm finally like, okay, yeah, this is what my classes are going to look like and this is what my major is. That didn't happen until like partway through sophomore year. So don't feel too pressured. I'm also going to put in a plug for office hours and getting those relationships with your professors. It's super important, not only for you, but I think it also just helps humanize the process of academics at Macalester, and that we're all people, we're all dealing with different things, and your professors are super understanding. I know for me, there was one time I was having a rough patch my second semester of first year, and my professor recognized that, and he was like, hey, let me give you an extension, take care of yourself, like be okay. And I had two professors do that, and they recognized it and were super like helpful and accommodating. So your professors can be some of your biggest advocates, and they like just talking with people can be so important. Get involved. I'm someone who didn't get involved really my first year, and I kind of regret that a little bit because I felt like I isolated myself from a lot of potentially amazing opportunities. But luckily, sophomore year, I kind of hopped on the bandwagon. So I say go to the org fairs, talk to your friends, see what they're doing. There's lots of identity collectives on campus. As like a Black woman, I joined the BLAC, which stands for the Black Liberation Affairs Committee. And there's also Africa. And it's been a really amazing, beautiful community on campus for myself. So I say if you're ever nervous about meeting new students or you don't know how you're going to make your friends, orgs and communities like that, I would say would be a good place to start. What else? Don't feel intimidated by upperclassmen. We're here to help you. It's okay. Come talk to us. We like you. I think that was something I didn't quite understand my first year, and so I was kind of just like, oh my gosh, they're a senior, I can't talk to them, I can't, what? No, they're too much for me. No, it's okay, come approach us, we're fine. And I think most importantly to me, take care of your mental health. Academics isn't everything at Macalester. There's so, like, I think both Ellen and Olivia said it was that there's so much more to campus, and if you just solely focus on academics, you could burn yourself out pretty quickly. So just a big department that was helpful for me for that was the Department of Multicultural Life. There's a lot of faculty and staff there that really had my back and could really help me with things. Yeah. And yeah, so I think my biggest community was like the Questbridge community because they kind of understood what I was like, my process, my campus connections type thing. So just finding your people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us all of that wonderful information and for speaking with us today. As we kind of near the end of our panel, I want to just echo a couple of things that were said throughout. Ayana mentioned talking to upperclassmen, asking upperclassmen questions, and building those like inner student connections. That's wonderful because incoming students are going to be meeting with their orientation leaders in just a couple of weeks. You'll have two OLs who are there for you. They're your immediate resource if you have any questions. But beyond your OLs, you'll also have your RAs, your resident assistant who will be living on the floor of your dorm if you're on campus. You'll have student orgs. If you have student employment, you'll have other student employees who are older than you, who have experience. You might have preceptors who are your teacher's assistants in your class who might act as tutors. They might act as side lecturers or lab instructors who are there to help you make sure that you have the information you need. But all of the information we've said today also only scratches the surface. All of our panelists have mentioned resources. All of them have mentioned ask your faculty questions. All of them have said reach out to others for support. And so this isn't supposed to answer all of your questions, and it's not supposed to tell you everything you need to know about Macalester. This is meant to be a kind of your push to figure out what you need and to be able to ask for that support and ask for those resources once you get to Mac in just 2 or 3 weeks. So it doesn't look like we've had any questions with our session today. So we're going to close out in just a minute. Before we do, I wanted to mention, Olivia mentioned Gap Year Group was a part of her experience in coming as a Gap Year student. And tonight, August 13th at 6 p.m., Gap Year Group is organizing for a meet and greet and Q&A session hosted by Elizabeth Landgren and Emma Kirchen. And even if you can't attend tonight, there will be future programming. And if you'd like their information, you can reach out to us at orientation@macalester.edu. And then there is another panel tonight that Professor Phillips is going to be a part of. So I'm going to let Professor Phillips take over and tell us about that briefly.
Thanks, Jackson. So this is definitely a bit of a switch from what we're talking about here with orientation, but one of the really important, I guess you could call them an office on campus, is our Institute for Global Citizenship, and they do a lot of really incredible programming, and they're currently doing one right now that's called Untangling Racial Politics and Ontologies, Local and Global Antagonisms and Possibilities. There are a lot of big words in that in that series title, but I'm on a panel tonight that's called How Does Race Matter? And it's about anti-colonial and anti-capitalist struggles across the globe. And it's the second in the series that's looking at kind of this collective campus community conversation around not only the COVID-19 pandemic, but also about the current political situation here in Minnesota, across the country, and around the world. And if that's of interest to anybody, it'll be tonight, so Thursday, August 13th, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Central Time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if you've never heard of or don't know what an ontology is, feel free to ask. I'm sure someone in the chat will be able to help you out. And just a quick question, is that going to be recorded? And if it is going to be recorded, where could students find that after the fact?
So I know that it will be recorded. I'm not sure where exactly the link will be posted because I've just kind of gotten them in emails after the first session and things like that. So I'm sure somebody somewhere has that answer, but it's not me.
We will, once we have that information, we'll be sure to post this alongside of the recording on the orientation website. But that just about does it for our time. So thank you so much to all of our panelists for coming out and speaking with us today. I know I really enjoyed hearing everything you all had to say, and I know it'll be especially helpful for our incoming students. And with that, we will wrap up our session today. So thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.